My name is Jeff Green.
George Rome. Jeff and I both manage the bar, and we're also part owners. I'm the one who writes the nasty notes to the bartenders that they need to do this or that, and he's the nice one.
What's my name? Dennis Frank. I'm 74, and I was a bartender at Twin Peaks for 25 years.
Elizabeth Carroll, I'm 90. I worked at the Twin Peaks as a cocktail waitress. Oh, we've been friends forever. Don't ask me how long.
My name is Edward Wesley. I'm 75 years old. I'm a retiree from one of my major airlines in San Francisco, United to be exact. I moved here in 69, 70 from Cleveland, Ohio. I had a friend who was, he was living here. He was a college friend of mine, and he asked me if I'd come out and help him, which I did, because actually I was on my way to New York when I was leaving Cleveland. I had no intentions of coming to San Francisco. Never went back.
I started visiting San Francisco in 1966, and I came out several times a year for enough years that I finally decided it was cheaper to move here.
Well, I used to hang out on Polk Street to begin with. That's where the gays were when I came to San Francisco.
I was aware of the summer of love when the hate filled with people, counterculture people, and the hate couldn't contain everybody. And they moved over the hill in this direction because this was the area where the cheapest rents were, unbelievably.
And then they started slowly moving to the Castro. One at a time would move up, buy a house, then a bar would open.
It was a predominantly blue-collar Italian Irish community, as was this bar.
It had been a straight bar before, sort of an Irish or working class men's bar. There had been no windows. The two brothers who owned it retired, and the two women bought it, opened up the windows, and it became a gay bar.
One of the stories I heard was that the windows were black, so the wives wouldn't see their husbands in here drinking. So when the girls took over, it was really pioneering of them to take the paint off of the glass and expose the patrons in a gay bar, because in 1972, at that time, it was just taboo to be, gay, and you heard about all the raids and all that stuff.
Well, it was illegal. People could fire you for being gay. Gay people were concerned about being seen in a gay bar because they didn't want to lose their job. So for a bar like this to open up and people to come in that are gay, they're making a statement that they're gay, and so they're allowing the world that goes by to see they're inside a gay bar.
And every gay person in the neighborhood said, nobody will ever go in that bar, and that was for sure. Within 2 weeks, it was jammed.
In a way, it was like coming out again. People could actually see you, and you could be seen from the outside world other than in the gay community. People would walk by and see gay people sitting around being, in quote, normal. So it was like I was coming out all over again, being reborn, to be able to sit in front of the windows and people see you.
When they took the paint off these windows, it really was the end of an era. It was the end of the mysterious era for gay people. It was the end of the mystery and the beginning of openness.
The first bar to have windows looking out into the street.
In this country.
In this country.
Yeah.
Gay bars before that were, down an alley, or the door was behind the dumpster or something like that. And it played a huge part. That brought people out into the open. They could come in here, but it was a no-touch bar. You couldn't, you couldn't sit with your arm or hold hands or stuff like that in the bar. But and I don't know if you were allowed to kiss your boyfriend or your friends below.
I mean, you could maybe give a little peck on the cheek to somebody, but if you were like really making out, no, they would stop it right away and say, this is not the place for that.
And remember the fact that Peggy, and she was the actual boss. I mean, Mary Ellen was in the back, she was boss, but Peggy was the ruler. And she told me when she hired me, she said, there's no kissing, there's no hugging, none of that. So here I am, a straight woman in the middle of all these gay guys going up and saying, I'm sorry, you can't do that. You know what you feel like? I mean, really. But she wouldn't allow it. There was no way. And she said it was on account of the windows.
Well, and the police would drive by and check the bar out all the time. You know, and if you had a couple of guys laying there necking in the window or something, you'd get a phone call. You couldn't do that in those days. It was, you know, you could do a lot, but it was behind closed doors, not under, you know, behind open windows like that. It was a different era. That bar brought in a totally different era to the gay bar scene as far as being open and having windows. And like the Elephant Walk followed suit after that.
When the pendulum finally closed down, people started coming over here, migrating over here because it's a fun place. Well, you see it's on the corner of Market and Castro. It's great for people watching, and then you start meeting all kinds of people, you know. I call it cheers for queers.
I moved into the neighborhood in 1973, and I was attracted because of the open windows. And by that time in my life, I was out to my family. And so I just, you know, I guess I never thought about being exposed if I were in here. And I felt that most of the people who were in here felt pretty much the same way. And, but I also was aware that it could be very threatening to some people.
People would come in to take photographs as tourists, and some of the patrons got very upset. They just didn't want that ambiguity and to take that chance. And now, you know, people stand up to have their picture taken.
Queens want to be seen, let's face it. So naturally, it became very popular after the shock of, you know, being seen by other people. Then it, you know, you wanted to be seen. That was the place to be seen. They could all drive by or walk by on the sidewalk and they could see you were in there. It's surprising how many people in those days you would wave to outside and they'd all come in.
That's it.
There would be cars with tourists going by, clearly heterosexual people. And they would look in the bar and they'd say, ah, there they are. There's the gay people. And we'd all wave and then they'd laugh. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they were just embarrassed. What they didn't seem to realize is that all the people on the street were gay. They couldn't make the distinction between there they are and there they are.
Part of the joy of living in this district, we were discovering one another for the first time ever. And we were every kind of profession and every kind of personality.
The summer of 1974, when I lived here, and I started coming to the Twin Peaks, that was the first year that the Castro Street Fair was going. And I was doing drawings of Victorian houses at that time. So I went into Harvey Milk's camera store and met him, and he had me set up a table right outside his store, and I displayed my drawings of Victorian houses. It's the only time I ever met Harvey Milk, and I treasure that, of course.
In the 70s in San Francisco, it was a blast.
That's it. It was fun.
It was like being a kid in a toy store.
Yeah.
You know, there were so many guys in town, and Castro was a different world. It was so much gayer then than what it is now. But we'd walk down the sidewalks after the bars closed, and they'd be lining the sidewalk on each side, and you could just walk down the street and find your little number for the night.
My name is James Leal. I'm 72. I was a designer. I did architecture, interiors, products, graphics.
I'm a boy and I like Harleys, and I'm a gay person. I like egg cups. So.
My name's Mike Larned. I'm 77. I went into the Peace Corps in Central Africa in 1963. I was 24 years old. I can't imagine where I would be today or what I would have had in my life if I had not had that extraordinary experience.
Judd Zebel, Mother of God. I'm 72.
Tom Libby, I'm 80 years old. Yes, I made it.
My name is Jim Warren. I'm 72, 73 in March, and I'm proud of it. I'm very happy about that.
From a fairly early age, I knew I was gay. Back then, you know, how shall I put it? I was very protective of myself.
I came out in my early 20s. I knew I was gay. I did not have a problem with that. I just didn't know where to find gay people. Figured that out.
When I came out, we didn't have language for it, really. And I was, you know, I mean, you hear other people talk about the camp talking and things like that. And that, yeah, you learned that once you came out. But you didn't learn it before. But we didn't really have, you know, there was nothing about gay people in the newspapers. You know, the news coverage we got was the Gay Pride Parade, and they just filmed drag queens. Drag queens are an important part of our society, but that's all they, you know, portrayed us as.
Despite the fact that I grew up in a liberal environment, my notion of gay people was that they either were drag queens or South of Market types of people who accentuated their masculinity to an almost comedic degree. And I thought, I don't fit those categories, and is there a place for me?
These days, in the 60s, you weren't out, you know, and you couldn't be out. Everything was closeted, and you would have, if you went to a gay bar, like when I was living in Des Moines, you'd walk down the back alleys and go around so nobody'd see you going in because you didn't want to be seen by anybody. And it was just totally different. And it was kind of sneaky in a way. It was kind of more fun because it was like, let's see what we can get by with, you know, which made it more intriguing.
Shortly after my 21st birthday, went to a bar in Denver, a gay bar in Denver, not very much different than Twin Peaks. This bar was called the Court Jester. And there were no windows. You could enter from the front door. There was a neon sign, but there was also an alley. And I had heard that you could actually enter a back door from the alley if you were concerned about people seeing you on the street.
We all had guides, the Bob Dameron's guide, and even before Bob Dameron guide, there were mimeographed sheets where the gay bars were. And sometimes, I think it might have been Amarillo, Texas, or Oklahoma City, the only sign of there being a gay bar was a blue light bulb over an unmarked door. That's how closeted and difficult it was for gay bars to exist in some cities.
Like when I was living in Chicago, I just missed the raid on the bar out on by the airport, and then a week later I was in the raid on Goethe Street, right across from the Ambassador East. They raided a big party, and they took everybody in. They let like every 7th person go because they didn't have enough, and they still took 100 and some people to jail. But they published all the names, ages, and occupations in the newspaper. And it really ruined a lot of people's lives because some of these guys were on the down low, and they were married and high school principals and teachers, and their career was over. There were several people committed suicide over it just because their life had ended virtually for them. It was a totally different world from what we're living in now.
I was very, very much in the closet back in New Jersey. My family didn't know, but they're very religious. So it was difficult for me to come out to them because I knew that I would be ostracized and not accepted. And I based that on the comments that they would make and that I would hear. And, you know, this story's not uncommon. I think a lot of people have experienced that before.
I come from a big family. I have 6 brothers and 1 sister. And, you know, we played every sport in the world. My father was a coach of everything in our little town. And, you know, I wanted to swim and ski. And those were 2 sports my father didn't do. So he also told me I was gay pretty much. he called me Mary when I was 6 years old or something like that. And it stuck. My brothers used it forever.
I went home with the intention of coming out to my family, and which I did, and they were all shocked by it, and I was kind of surprised that they were shocked by it because I moved to New York. I didn't have a girlfriend. I lived with a man. I moved to San Francisco with my roommate, and they just never had a clue, and they had a hard time with it. I have since worked out a lot of issues with them, their issues that they had with me, and we have a good relationship now.
I had really come out when I was like 16 or 17 to myself, but I felt the need to tell my sister. She was my best sibling, and so we went to my mother's house for Sunday dinner, and my mother wanted me to follow her home because she had a Volkswagen, a beat up old, and so we just went back into the city and had a drink. And I finally said, I came over to your house one night and I was going to tell you this before, but we got stoned and ate a whole cheesecake, and she said, what? And I said, and I finally said, I said, I'm gay, and she went, something I don't know.
Well, I never had to have the little talk with my parents because my dad came home and I was having sex with someone. That's my coming out story. There were a few rough years, like about 50 of them.
I would have never come out if I hadn't been kind of forced. My mother borrowed my car, and when she came to pick me up, she was like crying. And I realized that I had left some gay papers in the back seat of the car. And my mother, I'm sure she's kind of nosy, so I knew she had looked at them, so I had to come out to her.
I wasn't really active in gaydom before that. It was like I was married to my job, and I still am. The movie that I was working on was Enemy Mine, and when I went to Germany, all the dancers who played the aliens were all gay. And they kind of took me under their wings, and they took me out to the gay bars in Germany. That's where I would say, yeah, that's where it really started.
Well, you met people that you wouldn't ordinarily meet because in the workplace, of course, people were not talking about gay or talking about their boyfriend or talking about their girlfriends. So once you got to the gay bars, you could express yourself and talk about the things that you wouldn't talk about in mainstream society. So I think that was one of the reasons it made it important. And you couldn't do it here, but you could touch one another and that sort of thing. And nobody put you down, And you used terminologies that you wouldn't necessarily use on the outside. And if someone called you girl, you weren't offended, you wouldn't consider yourself a punk or a fag. It's just a vernacular that was used at the time.
Having lived as a straight man for the overwhelming majority of my life, but obviously always having been gay, when you are living a perfectly normal life, and I think I was, the jokes that you tell and the things that you can say are very, very different from what happens when you move yourself into a marginalized society. And being gay still is marginalized. I travel a great deal. I just came back from Egypt and Kathmandu in Nepal, India. Wouldn't think of going to a gay bar there or doing anything that would be overtly gay because it's dangerous. And I'm not going to take that chance. And you react that way. Your body changes. Your internal Weltanschauung looks different when you're in a situation where you know you can't be who you are. And so when anti-gay jokes are made in those places, your reaction is very, very different. You don't laugh at them or anything, but you also can't say don't do that. Or at least I can't. It's very, very hard, particularly when everybody else has big beards and they're all standing around thinking it's marvelously hysterical, but it's not. And you kind of have to let that go and come back here and get nurtured again in a place where you can talk this way.
My name is Stéphane Dupuis. I'm 59 right now. I'm a makeup artist for movies. I found myself with a makeup kit working on a movie set at a young age. I won an Oscar for a movie called The Fly.
My name is Dennis Johns.
I'm Tom Shepard.
I'm 73 in a week.
I'm 65.
I was a business consultant and business manager.
I started as a computer engineer, went on to be a commercial pilot, and then I was a bartender before I retired.
Dale John Thompson. I tend bar at the Twin Peaks. I've been here for 15 years, and I have a little decorating business, and I take care of my husband.
I just remember how comfortable I was in here, always, from the first time I ever came in. You know, people to talk to, and I think I had experiences with gay bars like a lot of men my age, that you went into a very loud, noisy place, and there was little opportunity to really converse with anybody. And this place was just totally different.
I always call it my Cheers bar because you come here and everybody knows your name. Well, there's always a group, and it's kind of a typical table where 3, 4, 5, 8 of your good friends will be seated. You go up to the bartender, you never have to order a drink. They always know what you want. It's tremendously comfortable.
The other bars were cruising bars, and we went to those south of Market for years, and I came here to socialize.
It's a different community than many bars because there's social contact between the people that work here and the people that come here. They respect each other. Working here is a real job. It's not something you do on your way to doing something else.
It's my social life. I mean, I go to a movie every once in a while. I went to the Chorus concert last night, but I like doing it.
When I started, 6 to 2, 3/4 of the men that came in those days worked in offices, were lawyers. They all wore suits. And they'd come in their suits and their briefcases. And I'd end up with 6 or 7 briefcases every night until they'd come back to pick them up. And they'd come in and have a couple of drinks after work, that was all, and visit a little, and they'd leave. But by 10 o'clock, they'd be back in their Levi's and their cowboy boots.
And then you get this different crowd that would come in at 11 o'clock after they got through their jobs.
Yeah.
A lot of them were in the service industry. And I would have a ball with them because by then, you know, all the hustle bustle was over and you could relax and talk to people, and it was a lot of fun.
You know, you really get into, get to know them and stuff, and figure out how they tick, and know what they drink, and know how many they're going to have, and things like that.
The Twin Peaks, I always think of the A table with Bill Fink,
Yeah, that's
where
it.
they had to have that one table every night.
Bill Fink had to have that one chair with the arms on it and that, and he'd come out of the underground, and I'd see him coming, and I'd order Scotch on the rocks and have it on the table when he sat down, and that was it. A lot of guys I did that. I'd see him coming, because the thing was, when I started there, I told everybody the same thing. I'll either remember your drink or your name. You pick what you want. And they all picked their drinks, so half of them I didn't know their names.
This is my family. My biological family I've never been close to. We create our own families, and this is mine.
This is like an extension of my living room. I don't drink at home. If I want to have a drink, I come to the Twin Peaks where I can chat with people.
There's been anniversaries here and celebrations of life, so many things. It's just really hard to pick one, I mean, I had my 60th birthday party was right here where we're sitting now.
It's just been a place where, for special occasions, we either include it in the itinerary or we make it the hub of the activity. And so the Twin Peaks is very special from that point of view over a whole range of events.
The National Brides Day, we have all the brides in here, hysterical. The Red Dress Day, when all the guys wear red dresses. Easter, with people dressed up as Easter bunnies. Oh gosh, this isn't a drag bar, but there sure have been some funny moments.
The tricycle race was one of the events they had. Charlotte Coleman who owned the Mint, she started the tricycle race, and there'd be 2-member teams per group, and all the guys, they would go from bar to bar, and they'd have to, each bar they go in, they'd have to buy a shot, and then they proceed on their way to the next bar. And that was a fun event. We were one of the bars, but they actually went to, I think, every gay bar in the neighborhood. By the time they were done, they were not walking too straight, I don't think.
Not walking too straight, I don't think.
There are definitely bar stools that don't necessarily have a plaque for them, but they could, because they usually want to sit in the same seat or the same table and have the same people wait on them, and that's always, you know, it's a nice thing.
The bar it was strange. You had two totally different ends, and there's different personalities on different ends, and they always went to their same end, which is good. But it was a different world from one end of the bar to the other, right?
Oh, yes, definitely.
You know?
If there's more of a gathering, I like to sit at a table. And I like to be able to look outside also, because there's always a show going on.
You talked about the table. It was like the round table at the Algonquin.
Somehow there's been a lot made out of what tables we sit at, and I don't quite understand why. We find a table with not many people at it, and then we sit there. Sometimes it turns out to be table number 5, I guess.
There was no table 5 when I came here. It was just a bar to meet people. You find in the normal course of talking, there's some of the same people in here all the time. You strike up a friendly conversation with one, he introduces you to somebody else, and it just kind of grows. It's grown over the course of years.
It's kind of interesting how the chairs expand until there are maybe 10 chairs here on one table, and then you kind of edge your way in.
Some people can be like pretty territorial. You know, you can tell that there's a certain group that sits at the end over here, a certain group that sits over here. I know some friends of mine really like this one particular chair. There's a friend of mine who, when he sees that this chair is free, he bolts, you know, goes immediately to that chair as if it had a plaque on it with his name on it. You know?
Stuart and Dick, they kind of fought over the same stool. And if Dick was sitting in Stuart's stool,
he'd stare him down.
He would sit, and Dick hated Stuart, and Stuart hated Dick. So Stuart would just get up right next to him. I mean, he would move his bar stool as close as he could to him, till finally Dick would get upset and leave the bar.
Liz, she's absolutely marvelous, but she owned the bar.
In a manner of speaking.
Yes.
When somebody come through the door, she knew where they sat, so she would grab them and put them where they belonged. And if their seat was taken, sometimes she would actually move somebody. Like if she didn't know the customer, then she would move so the regular would get where they normally sit.
Well, everybody had their table that they sat at. Each group would head right for their table. That was it. And so if somebody was sitting there, they were kind of like, well, we'll sit down anyway, and eventually that other person would get up and move. I mean, they'd take it over because it was their table.
But you know, like I said earlier about like everyone has a particular bar stool. I could name just so many, like Jerry Pruitt when he died. There were so many. Every bar stool had a face attached to it, and that space had a face attached to it.
So the new people that sit in that stool over there, when I was still tending bar here, I would always, and they loved that stool. And I would say, you know, everybody who's ever sat in that stool has died. So just to give them a little caution.
Until my last breath, I hope to die on that stool over there and be dragged out.
Yeah. Now this
with a good cocktail. Manhattan. Straight up.
Okay. I equated the health crisis and the loss of so many friends and acquaintances and public figures in a similar way. It was like going through war.
I go away on location fairly often. I was away for months, and somebody would pull me over immediately the minute I came back and say, guess who passed away? So yeah, I lived through that, and that, you know, that really affects you.
It was almost schizophrenic because the neighborhood, everybody would be up and whatnot, and someone would just mention that so-and-so is going down, and you just kind of, you insulated yourself. You just shut off to it. It's like, okay, I've got to distance myself from this friend because I know that they're on their way out.
You would open the BAR and there'd be like 4 and 5 pages of obituaries. It was unimaginable how bad it was.
I buried a lot of friends. You know, when I first moved here, the BAR said, you know, the Boston papers were had filled with obituaries for guys that were dying, and so was the BAR. But, you know, when you have this many gay people in one neighborhood, you see a lot more of it, you know.
No matter who you were, if you lived in San Francisco, everyone was touched by it in one way or another, either a friend, a partner. Yeah, it was devastating. It was devastating.
The bartenders here all were ill.
When I started here in 1989, all of the bartenders that I worked with initially, one by one, passed away, and it was very, very difficult.
December of '90, Paulie died, and then in January, Mikey died, and then Carolyn passed away in March, and they lost the whole slew of them. It was
everybody was
sad
dropping.
Time.
It was unreal. It was a time that you don't want to dwell on, actually, or think about.
My partner, Billy, who I moved out here with, he passed away.
My best friend and my partner died within a year of one another.
My partner, 17 years, died.
My first partner, who I was still very close to as a friend, came to the United States and contracted. And so I had a very personal experience of watching someone just waste away in front of my eyes.
So many of my friends died, roughly 50, including my lover.
At that time, I never thought I'd live to see 50, you know, because the way everybody was going.
I've been HIV for 35 years. I never thought I would live to be 50, but here I am.
It's just something to have most of your friends die when they're in their 20s and 30s. I absolutely didn't think I would be here today because I became positive myself in '93. And like I say, everyone was dying. It was a death sentence. So, you know, when the doctor tells you you're going to die and everyone around you is dying, you have no reason to not believe them.
I was in the Gay Men's Chorus, and we went on the national tour, the first one in the country. It was right before AIDS came to the forefront, and there were 110, I believe, of us at the time, and
they're mostly gone.
They're mostly gone, yeah.
Well, there were awful years, of course. There were awful, awful years, decades. I'm not sure I can answer that question without tearing up.
It's a feeling I really can't describe, and you know, it's kind of like that song comes to mind of "If That's All There Is," and let's break out the booze and have a ball. Well, I did, and so did so many of my friends. And what else do? You know, you sit home and just rot silently, or enjoy it as much as you can. And yeah, it influenced everything here. You know, for us, it was our life. That was what we dealt with. That's what you woke up with in the morning.
I have a totally different experience. I wondered why I hadn't become an HIV sufferer, because I did all the same things that transmitted the disease so freely before anybody knew what it was about. When I met Tom, obviously, That was one of the first things that he made sure I knew. But he was living life like there was no tomorrow. I wasn't doing that. So he became very sick very early in our relationship after I'd moved to San Francisco. And we had flown to Florida. I literally had him in the intensive care unit with the doctor telling me he may not last the night. And he did last the night, and it was Christmas Eve. And I had him on a plane at 5 a.m. and flew him home and got him on the couch. And he didn't move for 6 weeks off that couch. But during that 6 weeks, he decided that he wanted to live and was going to live in spite of it, and here he is. So that's the difference in our experience, because, as I said, I was asking the question, how did I miss this? You know, and there's no answer to that, by the way.
It became a safe haven here for people to come and grieve and be with people and talk to people that were experiencing the same thing.
Again, this bar served as a refuge. You could sit and you could look, but you were not, in a sense, a part of it. There was a window separating you. You didn't have to talk to somebody who you knew and was clearly dying. You could nod. Even then, we knew one another in here. And for the handful of new people who came, this bar was not sexual. And that was a relief during that period of time.
Well, everybody pitched in and helped everybody else because we had no help. There wasn't the government that helped us then. The city didn't help us. Nobody helped us. We couldn't get help from anybody.
We remember the protests out in the streets when the ACT UP. They would just come to the intersection out front here and just block everything just to bring attention to the AIDS epidemic because nobody was paying attention to it. Reagan was in the White House and nobody was giving a damn about all the gay people that were dying. So
some of the people that I took care of, it was panic. I was driving Lenny to the airport to get some illegal experimental drugs, and he'd go to the airport. People were smuggling. It was just crazy. It was, smuggling drugs into the country just because the FDA wouldn't test them.
We had to organize and do garage sales and do all kinds of things like that, maybe to pay their rent. That's how it went. There wasn't what there is now. Nothing like there is now.
But when the girls opened the Twin Peaks, they were pretty instrumental in getting insurance for all the bartenders in the neighborhood when the plague hit. Because everyone was, had no insurance. They were all up at General Hospital in the Ward 86, which is, in those days, it was the poor ward. These girls were instrumental in getting this insurance for us. And the boys are carrying it on.
Those girls did an awful lot, and they did a lot behind the scenes, that they didn't want to be known, and they just miscellaneously giving people money that were down on the down and out.
And they were just wonderful people, took really good care of us, and had big hearts, and were just kind.
Back at that time, I was working up at Davies Hospital, as well as working at the bar, and I was working for this ophthalmologist who took care of a lot of gay patients, and because at that time there was so much eye infections from the AIDS related, and the doctors, most of them didn't want to take them because they didn't know what they were dealing with.
Well, they didn't want to handle anybody.
And Scarlett says, "Bring them on, I'll take them." And I learned so much compassion from that woman because I would see these kids come in from the hospital with hoses out of every place they shouldn't be, and so forth. And the first thing she would do is run over and give them a big hug and kiss. And I must have looked really shocked one day, but she said to me, that may be the only kiss they ever get because their parents have disowned them. They have nobody.
When I moved to New York to take care of that friend, His parents came from Texas to visit. And again, religion. But they were so horrible to me. Like I was the hired help or something like that. And she was so sure God was going to come down and touch Lenny on the head and make him all better, you know.
And then you'd have to deal with the relatives that would show up, that these boys who were dying or just died hadn't seen in years because the relatives didn't want anything to do with them. But then all of a sudden, they wanted everything. I'll tell one story, and only one, and I won't mention a name. But I was at this man's house on a Saturday morning. They had called me Friday night at work and told me to come. And I went. And he said his sister was coming. And I said, oh, I'm so glad. Well, she came in the morning, and I greeted her and told her he was in the bed, and you can go in and talk to him. He's, you know, he can talk and everything. She went in and spoke a little bit and came back out, and then I went in. And I was in there for maybe 20 minutes, and I thought, where is that lady? And I got up and went in. He had a nice big apartment, and she was in the dining area. And she was cleaning out the china closets and packing all the beautiful silver and all the beautiful glass and everything. I said, what are you doing? Oh, well, I have to pack everything so I can send it home. I said, he's not dead yet, for Christ's sake. That was what we dealt with.
Yes.
That was one story. There's hundreds.
Nobody knew how to do anything. And my friend John said one day, he said, this isn't the world our parents were brought up in. And when we were talking about Lenny's parents, I said, this isn't the world we were brought up in. I said, we were never told that never taught how to take care of our old, our friends and people that were sick. So that's a huge thing is taking care of somebody they've sort of reverted back to childhood. You have to give them, you have to fill those childhood needs for them, and it's heartbreaking.
I remember going to a funeral very soon after I arrived with Tom, and he just disintegrated emotionally. Everyone was trying to be supportive and so forth. As we walked out the door, he said, I can't do this anymore. And we never attended an actual funeral from that day, but we either participated in or actually organized several celebrations of life here at the Twin Peaks, where crowds of people would get together and remember the positive about the people we were losing still. Today, it's no longer the primary cause of people dying.
I was so happy when new drugs came along and people started living, and most of us just didn't believe it when it started. That's how bad it was. We just thought, just like AZT or anything else, it's still, we might have put it off a year or 2 years or something, but yeah, like I said, it's just indescribable, the actual feeling that you get. It's that everything is temporary. It's all going to go away. So, and I think in some ways it's why we just had a party. It was like the band on the Titanic in a way, just might as well. So it wasn't a good time, but at the same time, we made the very best of it. And now we're still here.
Each story long untold, 'cause no one stopped to hear it, starting to unfold when we no longer fear it. And what might soon come to light, no one will ever break it. What seems like forever never lasts too long. Now here we are together, standing one wrong. Despite the fact we hit pushback, we are far from gone. But we all play on. We all stand strong. But we all play
I think one of the things that Twin Peaks has done is to help normalize gay. What I said earlier about it not being a trendy bar or trying to leather or any, it opened up. One of the reasons they had all this glass was to be open to the world. You know, we're gay and we're not that much different than anybody else. We're just gay.
In the early 80s, when the neighborhood was becoming gay, or mid 70s, walking by some of the bars that are still here now with different names, and seeing the Irish blue-collar men complaining about how the gays were taking over, and I feel like, my God, what goes around comes around, doesn't it? You know, now I'm sounding just like them.
Like my family, who have become so accepting of me and my partner, I think that has spread, you know, throughout the country, which there's still issues and there's still homophobia, and you know, that's not going to go away tomorrow, but it's much better now.
Do I think there'll never be a need for gay bars? I hope not, because it's a place where we meet and we are alike. We all have one thing in common when we get here, and the rest we find out once we're here.
I would just say it brought people together in a way that most places have not, especially the gay community. The bar, the Castro in general, and help spread the word throughout the country that gay people are just as alive and do the same thing that heterosexual people do.
I've seen it happen where, you know, gay has been accepted. You know, we have a lot of work to do, but it's becoming apparent that we have as much right to be here as anybody. And one of the reasons that the Castro and the Twin Peaks became what they were was there was a time when we kind of had to, what I call it, circling the wagons. We found a place where we could hold up and have our own, and for the most part govern ourselves and police ourselves. And we did that, and we took care of each other. And some have said, well, it's too bad to see the neighborhood changing. Some say that the Twin Peaks is not a gay bar anymore. I disagree. It is. The fact that we don't have to all circle the wagons and hold up and defend ourselves against the outside world is because we can now live in it. So, yeah, I'm happy to see what's happening. I feel like we've all been a part of that. You know, every one of us is just by staying gay. You know, I'm not going to hide, and there's really not much you're going to do to get rid of me.
Still we all live on. And we all play on. We will all stand strong.
Well, I brought some. So I'll show you. This is, there was a very famous silversmith family called Bateman at the early 1800s in England. And this is a Georgian silver egg cup. It's sort of faux simplicity.
Oh, thank you.
Hey.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys. I mean, this is the first time I think anybody gave a shit about anything I had to say.
The English silver thing changed, and by 1933, during the Depression, they were doing things like this. The person who bought this was not poor.
If there's any raisins in our teeth, tell us.
Okay. Do we get paid now? And it's decorated in a unique way that was only done in Dresden. In 20 years, I've only seen 3 of these on the market, and I have 2.
You're welcome. Thank you. I gotta stand up. I got a kink in my sacroiliac.
What's interesting about it is the outside is plain, but the Victorians were very interesting people. They like to hide things. So the interior, which you would never see, is highly decorated, and the Victorians were fearless about color.
Thank you. Thank you.
My turn.
Okay, it's a wrap.
Jimmy, get ready for the sequel. They need you again.
And one more. This is a very working egg cup from what was once the largest steamship company in the world, the British India Steamship Navigation Company. And it's had a hard life.